So who do you look at when you're presenting? Does it matter that you're not looking at the camera? I think it probably does. So over the last couple of years, we've all been presenting a lot more online. And I see this time and time after again, the conversation of where do you look when you're presenting? Do you always look at the camera? Do you look at the monitor? Do you look at the people that you're looking at? Do you look over here? Do you look at your script? These are the questions I want to answer in this video. Whatever environment you are communicating in, the most important thing is that you're communicating to your audience. You want to get your message across. So any distractions are going to take away from the content and not get that message across, and that's really integral. Now in the theatre, you're constantly under the spotlight, so you can't actually see the audience, so you can't gauge any emotion, any apart from applause and laughter, so that's an oral thing, but visually you generally can't see them. So what performers tend to do is they tend to section the auditorium, so they know that they're going to look at either the stalls, the circle, the upper circle, or even the boxes, and they'll look at those and they'll make a point of, as they're performing, to reference them or the people that they, even though they can't see them, there they are up there. The idea is to get everybody involved in the performance. You don't want to leave anyone out. So if you're looking at one area, either what used to be called the back of the room, look at the back of the room, which is a cliche technique to get you to focus on your content. But that's useless because it's not engaging with the right people and not engaging with the audience. So I've got a couple of suggestions about that. Now on TV, there is generally an audience. There's a studio audience that you're performing to. But the biggest audience, obviously, depending on the TV channel, are the audience at home. So you want to be focusing on the camera. You want to be looking at the camera. But obviously, if you're just trying to find the camera all the time, you know how weird that is when someone just constantly looks at the camera or tries to find the camera. There we are. And there we are again. It's a little bit off-putting, but as a performer, you know, I love it actually. The odd time that I've performed on TV, it's great, and it's a bit of an ego boost, I must admit, to find the camera and just to have, you know, and show off basically, which is what all performers love to do. Now, when we're on stage, which is slightly different to the theatre where you can't see anybody, on stage, whether it be a concert or a jazz gig or anything like that, or a pop gig, you can generally see the audience, and we call it working the room. So, for instance, I'll give you an example. I've been to a few concerts, and I remember going to see Prince once, and I'm adamant that he sang to me. I promise you, he looked at me and he sang to me. He sang that song to me. Now, I know what you're thinking. There's no way that Prince is going to pick you out, Jimmy, to sing a song to you. Well, I beg to differ, and I'm absolutely positive that he did. Joking aside, he's engaging, he's working the room, he's looking at everybody, he's involving everybody in his performance. Now, you might have heard sing or perform or speak to the back of the room. Now, that's a good guide. It's a bit of a cliche, but what it is, it's a good guide to, I'll use an analogy, which is squash. Now, I've played squash a few times, and there's the tee line, and the idea is that once you've hit the ball, you then go back to the tee line. So use the back of the room, center back of the room. So if I'm looking at you, the back of the room, bang, right at the center at the back. Use that as a reference point, as a default position to go back to regain your thoughts, to position yourself again. So that could be the middle of the stage or front middle of the stage, or it could be visually looking or concentrating or focusing on the back of the room. But whatever you do, don't look at the back of the room constantly throughout your presentation, because it's just going to look weird. It reminds me of an old supply teacher that I had. Now, I remember this. She came in for a day, I think, and I think she took us for geography, and I never really listened in geography, unfortunately, anyway, but I certainly didn't listen to her, because she came in and her sort of technique or philosophy was to just stare at the back of the room, and we were wondering what she was looking at, and we thought maybe there was another room behind her, or a very tall person, because she was looking above us, over us, and at the back of the room. She wasn't engaging with us. She wasn't communicating with us individually. And I think anybody that can do that, and they can look at you look at the audience and they can look at every single person at some point in their pitch or their presentation, will win everyone over. One very, very simple tip, and it's not going to work all the time. Firstly, it depends whether you have an MC or a co-presenter on stage. If you're doing a conference, then use them to bounce off. So you could actually just look at them and validate your content, your message through them. They're generally, because if they're professional, they're going just to be standing and smiling and acknowledging your presence and acknowledging what you're saying as authentic and the truth. So by looking at them, and it might be, and of course 99% of people use this technique, and they're going to be, yes, of course they are. I'm not even listening, but I'm just going to acknowledge. Now that's a way just to change and make variety out of who you're looking at, and use them as a sort of validation of your point. Now, how do we transfer those skills, those ideas, from the stage to the screen, or from the conference to online presentation? So whether you're doing webinar, face-to-face, face-to-camera like this, or you're doing Zoom meeting, etc., etc., how do you transfer these skills? Well, I see a lot of people either doing this. They're either not looking at the camera at all, and they're looking at either themselves, which I'm doing now. I'm looking at myself in the monitor, or they're just looking at the other person that they're speaking to. I want to see, like we all do, we're human, and we want to see the other person's reactions, their expression, how they're reacting to your message, how they're reacting to your comments. Are they in line with their expression, their facial expression, with what you're saying, whether it's positive or negative? So we constantly need to look at people's expression to validate, again, what our message and how that's coming across. However, if we're looking at them, then that's going to look strange, because we're not actually looking at them, we're just looking at a picture of them on screen. So we need to look at the camera, but if we're looking at the camera, we can't see their expression on their face. So the answer is to work the room. And perhaps if you're doing a webinar, which admittedly a lot of the time you can't see anybody, so you're just stuffed, you have to look at the lens, then try to look at everybody else as you're speaking. As if I was doing a webinar now, I'd be not just looking at the camera, I'd be looking at everybody on the Zoom. And it actually looks like I am, hopefully, looking at you now, depending on where you might be on the screen. And obviously, as you know, either in meetings or in Zoom or any other platform you might use for communication, the image that you see is different to the image that everyone else sees. So it's very, very tricky. So try to look at mainly the camera lens or the lens on the webcam, but also a little bit to the other people that are involved, or the participants or delegates within the meeting or the webinar. So to me, if you're pitching, looking at the camera, even doing a webinar, looking at the camera constantly like this is very, very off-putting and distracting. And it's similar to looking at the back of the room all the time. It's just not natural. And that means that you're just generally looking at somebody, one person, singular, rather than an audience. So I think look at the camera most of the time when you're online, but just occasionally veer away slightly and like that. And it might just be that you're looking at your notes, or you're looking at something else, or you're looking at what might be other people on screen. Now, the last thing about where to look when you're presenting online is pitching. Now, if you're reading from a script, so if I was reading from a script here, and I'm looking actually at my monitor now, but I'm looking at, let's say my script is there, or it might just be above the camera like that, and I'm reading the script as I'm talking to you, that's obvious that I'm reading. It might just be that you've set it up really well so you can read the script. But of course, if my eyes are following the script like I'm doing now, I'm sort of making this up now as I'm going, but I imagine that your eyes are going through the script like that. It's obvious that you're reading, and that's very distracting. And it's going to take away the most important thing, which is the content and the message and your product, which is the most important thing, which is the thing that you're selling. And if you're pitching, you're obviously trying to get investment. So this is really important that you're speaking to the investors and not to your script. Let's talk a little bit about gesturing. So on stage, we use, you can see I'm doing this now. On stage, for instance, on conferences, we use our hands to either gesture to a presentation that we're using behind us, or somebody in the audience, or it might be that we're introducing somebody or introducing a topic. But the most important thing is that we want to introduce or reflect openness in our body language. So if you can't see I'm doing that, my arms are wide. Now you obviously can't see me doing that because my arms and my hands are underneath the composition of the screen, and I've come a little bit closer than I am normally just to demonstrate how that would look when you're doing a presentation online or webinar. So obviously you can occasionally see my hands. So what you want to do is very simply just lift your hands up. And if you saw the whole of my body, my torso, that would look a bit silly. That would look a little bit like a Tyrannosaurus Rex. But in this instance, I think it's important that we are aware of our body language and our hands and how we gesture, not all the time, but it might just be the occasional hand gesture like that, and then the rest of it's down, and then we can just bring hands up. So focus on how we might bring our arms and our hands up within the composition of the screen. So be aware of how your facial expressions are coming across online. Are you smiling enough? Is it, okay, it might be a serious subject that you can't smile about too much, but just be aware that your eyes and your facial expression give pretty much everything away about how you're feeling and how your content comes across. So the key point to remember is that you're engaging to real people, and that's really, really important. So you can't have any distractions about composition, about the script, about looking away from the camera. So don't distract too much from the content and focus on your audience wherever they might be. Speak soon.